Hello developers, today I will do a screencast based on the post Secure WebSockets in Java, which you can find in the Okta developer blog. For this tutorial, you will need the Okta CLI and a Java SDK version 8 or above. I will be creating a simple UI using HTML and JavaScript with two blue buttons to start and end the WebSocket interaction, the WebSocket connection. The circle buttons will play sounds. I will emulate multiple sessions using tabs, so when I play one sound in the first tab, it will play also in the second tab after the event message is passed through the WebSocket connection. So the first step is to create a message broker server application. I will be using the Spring Initializer API. So with curl, I will request a Maven project with a Spring Boot Maven project with WebSocket and Okta dependencies. And now I will open the project and start making modifications. So the first modification is to add this dependency to the PON, Spring Security Messaging. So let's add it right here. And then we need to create a config class for the message broker with the annotation enable WebSocket message broker that will initialize a simple web broker provided by the Spring framework. So let's create that class. So here we define three important endpoints for the message broker. The looping endpoint is the WebSocket handshake endpoint, so WebSocket connections must be requested at this endpoint. The topic endpoint is the actual simple broker endpoint for publish, subscribe interactions, and the app endpoint allows to pass messages to controllers for processing if you annotate them with the message mapping annotation. Now let's do the security configuration. You can do authentication in the web application, and then the principal will be handed off to the WebSocket. But for this use case, we want to do token-based authentication. So for this, let's first create a WebSocket security config class, extending the abstract class to request any message, any inbound message to be authenticated. Then for doing the actual authentication, we need to configure a channel interceptor that we are going to configure with this new class, WebSocket Authentication Config, implementing Message Broker Configurer. So as you can see, the interceptor will attempt to decode the header value from the header X authorization. And then if the decoding is successful, the authentication will be successful. Otherwise, the connection will be rejected. This is important. This order annotation is required so the interceptor comes before the Spring Security filter change, and this processing can happen before the Spring Security rejects the unauthenticated request. Finally, let's add more security configuration to allow requests for static resources like HTML page, the single page that will be served from the same application. Let's allow this request to be unauthenticated. Okay, so I want to use Okta Authentication for the application and the WebSocket connection. So I already have the Okta CLI installed. I'm going to register for a free developer account. Okta register. So once it creates the account, it will send you an email with a verification code. The email will look like this. So I will just copy the code and the account is created. I need to change the password. So let's open this link. New password. And I get access to the Okta dashboard. So now we need to create a client application in Okta for our application to authenticate, to identify itself. So let's go to the project folder, run with the Okta CLI, Okta apps. create. Let's do single page app. Option 2. Let's modify the callback to be the root. Logout can be the same default. And we see the CLI outputs the issuer and URL and the client ID. So now let's add that to our app. Let's first rename application properties to YAML. And the config we need to add is somewhere here. This is the YAML lines. So now let's copy the issuer. And that's it. That's all the configuration for the server. Now let's create the WebSocket client page. First, let's add WebCharts dependencies to the project. Let's add that to the POM. Here we're adding the SOX.js client that allows to fall back to a non-WebSocket communication when that is not supported in the browser, and the Stomp WebSocket library, which is to enable the text-based protocol Stomp. You can find more information in the blog post. Then let's start adding the static resources. Let's create the index.html, which will contain the mentioned buttons, and the resources. Let's add static and then index.html. And then let's add the audio libraries and UI libraries. The audio library is Tone.js. Let's download Tone.js. Let's save it to the desktop. The other one is Nexus UI. Here is a link for the resource. And let's copy these resources to the project. So first let's create a folder JS, and then let's do cp desktop Nexus UI to source main resources static JS. Now I implement the Okta login using the Okta SDK, the JavaScript SDK. So let's create an Auth.js file. You can see a description of this block in the Okta JavaScript SDK documentation. But what this block does is, if this is a redirect from login, it will parse the access token and the ID token from the URL. Otherwise, it will redirect to the Okta login page to get the tokens. So we need to set the actual issuer here. Let's copy it from the Okta CLI output, copy link address. And let's also copy the client ID we got for the single page application, and that's it. Okay, the next step is to implement the WebSocket connection. So let's create the file static.js app. And let's copy these blocks, these functions. So we have the connect function that will only proceed if we have an access token available. It will create a SOC.js object and will attempt the WebSocket connection, sending the X authorization header with the access token value. So if the connection succeeds, it will request to subscribe to the loops topic, which is the topic for sending button events. And right here, the handler function will attempt to dispatch the message to the right button and restart playing the sounds. So finally, let's create a loop UI.js file to initialize the circled buttons. We're only going to initialize button 1 and 2. And we need to make the web files as static resources available to the app. So let's create a loop folder. It's loops. And then copy those resources to that folder in the app. So sounds, loop, chill, one web, 2, source, main resources, loops, static, loops. And the other one is loop drum wave, loop drum 1 wave. Okay, let's now run the application. Let's open an incognito window. Let's do the Okta login. Now let's see the console. When we connect, you can see the stop messages in the console. For example, the connect command with the access token in the header, and then the subscribe message with the destination of topic looks, which is publish subscribe endpoint for event messages for the buttons. So now let's open a second tab. Let's connect as well to the loops topic, and let's play a sound in this tab. As you can see, the sounds are activated in both tabs because of the messages we are passing through WebSockets. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to check out the Okta developer blog for the latest content. Follow Okta Dev on Twitter and subscribe to the Okta Dev channel on YouTube. Bye bye.